All right, everybody, we're back. Brand new show. As always, love being able to bring you the latest and greatest research in the world, especially on topics that are going to improve your overall health and longevity. So as you know, in my practice, I'm focused on two things. The first one is adding a healthy 20 years to people's life, or we'll just say adding a 20-year life extension to you, the listener. That means if the average age of a male is about 75 years old, 80 years overseas if you're in Japan, well, we can get most individuals to 95 to 100 years old. I'm very confident in that. But I don't want to just extend lifespan. I want to extend health span. So the longest lived, healthiest people they really are healthy. Now, are they a 25-year-old when they're 95? No, but they're truly healthy. They have their mental faculties, they have their physical ability, and they have it really to the last 6 to 12 months of their life. That is what I want really for everyone in this community. And so if you sum that together, that's why in high performance health, we call it adding a healthy 20 plus years to everyone's life. That's my goal. I hope it's yours as well. Sure, we can shoot for 120, but on the way to 120, we have to get to 100. So let's start there. All right, so that is why when I bring you all these episodes, it's really with that foundation. First, let's get to a healthy weight. We know that's one of the most important things. Second, let's get well. If you have a chronic disease, your ability to live to 100 is going to be more challenging. So then we fix that. And then, of course, the last phase is working on anti-aging and longevity. Too many people focus on anti-aging longevity, all the little special, I call it icing the cake, all the icing on the cake without doing the first two. Do the first two, and then you get to the last part. That's what we teach in Personomics, and that's our one-on-one coaching. If you ever want to check it out, it's just at personomics.io. That's about it. All right, so today, what am I really talking about? I'm talking about one more thing that most of us do daily that could lower our all-cause mortality by 15%, and that's if done correctly. So I wanted to share this pretty much definitive, I can't say it's definitive, right? But there are so many studies on this now, and this one was done on 508,747 Norwegians. So what did they look at? Coffee consumption. And here's what was interesting. The individuals that drank espresso or coffee without a filter had roughly average mortality, and some actually increased cardiovascular death in men over 60. Those that brewed their coffee in a more specialized way actually decreased all-cause mortality and lowered it by about 15%. And this was a 20-year study. They also found that brewing your coffee in a certain way increased your LDL cholesterol, we'll call it your oxidized or bad cholesterol, by about 5 to 10 points. So kind of a big deal and very easy to overcome this. So I'm just going to give you 3 quick points, and this is all that you really need to know. So the first one is this. When they looked at, regardless of coffee, believe it or not, there is a big difference between a light roast, a medium roast, and a dark roast. So what I wanted to, I'll share the differences in those in just a second. But regardless of the coffee, adding a papered filter reduced all-cause mortality by 15%. Call it the hazard ratio. Okay. The next one was unfiltered coffee. And they looked at it, and it was, okay, consuming coffee in general, though, helped to reduce overall mortality by about 4%. To, in some cases, up to 9%. So not as good with a paper filter. We'll talk about which paper filters are best in just a second, but pretty good because we know that certain types of coffee help to improve type 2 diabetes, believe it or not, and high blood pressure and even cardiovascular. All right. The next one was looking at overall cardiovascular mortality with unfiltered coffee. Well, coffee raised or reduced all-cause mortality by about 0.3%. So pretty much like on average, okay? And then the last one was men who drank unfiltered coffee over the age of 60 actually increased cardiovascular risk by about 19%, which was pretty stunning. And it's not exactly known why. It could be the caffeine itself. It could be, which we'll talk about in just a moment, the cafestol, which can raise your LDL cholesterol and potentially cause more cardiovascular risk. It could be the tightening of the arteries themselves if we increase stress in the body, such as norepinephrine and cortisol from caffeine. But anyway, it was fascinating. So regardless, my goal is saying this. What did the research say? What can we do in order to improve health? The first thing is this. No matter what type of coffee you do drink, if you can use a paper filter and ideally so just don't go for the white ones, go for a non-bleached paper filter. They also showed that a very tight stainless steel mesh, such as maybe a French press or some of the Chemex, instead of a paper, they use the stainless steel mesh now. That can help to catch those oil droplets. We'll just call it the cafestol, okay? So what happens is, by catching those, it virtually removes the cardiovascular risk. And so you get pretty much all benefit from all the antioxidants that I'm going to talk about in a moment without the fats, we'll call it fats from the coffee. Now, I know there's not a lot, but it does make a difference on the LDL and cardiovascular system. So first things first, super simple. We're going to use a cellulose fiber, paper filter, or we're going to use something to catch those oil droplets. And then only the water-soluble compounds will pass through. Very simple, very straightforward. They did show that French presses can work. It just needs to be a fine mesh. That's essentially what they said. The second is this, and I'm going to just leave you then with what the healthiest of all worlds are. When we talk about roasting coffee, we're essentially saying the longer we leave it in to bake the beans, to cook the beans, the darker the roast. A lot of people like the dark roast because it's smoky. Sometimes it's a little bit more acidic. Sometimes there's more flavor, people sometimes say. Okay, the darker the roast, the less chlorogenic acid. Now, when you hear acid, sometimes you think it's a bad thing. Not in this case. Chlorogenic acid is directly related to the antioxidants, the level of antioxidants in the coffee, the polyphenols. Okay, so when it is dark roasted, when something says dark roast on it, it has on average about 74 milligrams of the chlorogenic acid. I'm just going to say antioxidants, all right? So 74 milligrams of these antioxidants. A medium roast has 119 milligrams of antioxidants. So what's that? It's a little bit more, maybe like 35%, 40% more than the dark roast. And then the light roast has 244 milligrams of those antioxidants, more than three times more antioxidants than the dark roast. Now, a lot of people in the coffee industry and the health industry have known this for a while. And that is why when you look at some of the blends that people make, they're a light medium or they're a light roast. And the reason is that a lot of people do like the darker roast, but the medium or light medium has so many more antioxidants. Now, there's always the downside. So what's the downside? When you use a light roast, it's going to have more of the cafestol, more of those oil droplets. So what do? You use a paper filter, right? So like it's interesting because if you use a light roast, you get more antioxidants, but then potentially more of the cafestol. And if you use a dark roast, you get less antioxidants, but you get less of the cafestol. So when people are having a shot of espresso, if it has no filter, they're getting less of the antioxidants, but they're getting less of the cafestol as well. So it's pretty fascinating. I'm going to share the research on the espresso in just 1 second because the researchers did a very good job of summing all of this up. So in an ideal world, I recommend to most of my clients a light to medium roast, but you have to be, again, a little bit more cautious because there'll be more caffeine in light roast as well. So a light to medium roast or a medium roast if you like more of the flavor, but not a dark, especially if you have histamine issues because the dark is going to be a little bit smokier. And then use a paper filter. Most of my clients just use a Chemex or some of them like to use a French press. The Chemex, you can just buy the unbleached paper filters, and there you go. It doesn't have to be the Chemex. It can just be a pour over, basically. That's all that really matters, right? And you're going to put on average about 2 to 3 tablespoons of coffee grinds. You can use a medium grind or however you like to do it. I can do a whole show on that because I do love the art of coffee roasting. Myself, I don't do a lot of caffeine only because caffeine does affect me, truthfully, but I do enjoy coffee. I have 1 cup after breakfast every morning, and I very much enjoy it. And then I'll typically do a Swiss water process or CO2 extraction, organic decaf post-lunch, which I very much look forward to as well. But in a decaf, there's only like 10 milligrams of caffeine, so it's very, very low. Okay, so light to medium roast, absolute best, most antioxidants. Use a paper filter, you're good to go. So now what did the evidence show? The evidence said just what I said. Use a paper filter to reduce all-cause mortality by about 15%, meaning that's all causes of death. And we know the top 5 causes of death are what? Cardiovascular, blood pressure, stroke, type 2 diabetes, cancer, and Alzheimer's. So drink your coffee. It is good for you. Don't go overboard with the caffeine. Use a paper filter. Choose a lighter roast. Light to medium, medium at the most. Again, I'm not going to tell you not to do your dark roast. I know that some people love that. You're still going to get benefits from it. But if you want those antioxidants, that's what I would choose, without a doubt, because there's 3 times higher chlorogenic acid. All right, the last one is this. Watch the espresso volume. This is what they said. This is literally in the research. Okay, the research said more than 1 shot a day could be potentially detrimental. More research is needed. For those doing more than 3 shots of espresso per day, it said the random controlled studies showed unfiltered coffee does raise HDL, potentially linked to higher mortality, especially over the age of 60. I can't give you definitive because this is associative right now, but I think it's worth looking into. And we do know the alternative is actually healthy, right? So we don't necessarily know if the unfiltered is going to continue to increase mortality, but we do know that the filtered coffee, light to medium roast, is going to be the best of all worlds. I'm going to keep it at that for today. Hopefully this was helpful. If you know a coffee drinker or coffee lover, do feel free to share this show with them. They can head on over to stephencabral.com/3842 for the audio, the video, and all the show notes. Take care, everybody. Have an amazing rest of the day. I'll talk with you soon.